Hi, welcome back to class. Here we are, the American Musical Theater. Now, I had left off our last lecture talking about George M. Cohan, who was the only actor to have a statue of himself. Next time you go to Times Square, you want to get a discount ticket at the TKTS booth, look in front of those red stairs. There's a statue there of George M., and it's the only statue in New York to an actor. George M. was difficult to work with, but he had a personality that outshone his bad attitude and a vulnerability on stage that he couldn't show in real life. Audiences loved him. He was brass, aggressive, funny. And that puts me in contrast to another really key person in American musical theater, and that's Bert Williams. Well, if you haven't guessed by now, today's lecture is going to be about the people on Broadway. So last lecture we talked about history, but I want to put a human face on it. We're going to hit a difficult topic today. There's a dark side to American musical theater, just as there is with American history. Minstrelsy. Minstrelsy was impossibly popular for almost 20 years. And the styles, the way the shows were constructed, the approach to performance still shows up in American musicals today. So it's an important part of understanding our history and understanding how the shows are built and why do they do that. Well, for 20 years, they looked at minstrelsy and took apart the bits that made the audience go, wow. The parts that made the audience go, ooh, they have moved past, like blackface, for example. Minstrelsy is also difficult because it's an appropriation of a culture. What we had was white people who looked at black performers and admired them, but then rather than asking them to perform, to write, to do things, the white people of power who had the money would take those things, rewrite them, put white actors in blackface, and have them try to perform it. So, of course, it wasn't really very authentic. And in fact, it's sort of an oddity. If you look at it now, it's just sort of like, how did that get to be popular? Well, part of it was the structure. They had a strong plotline structure that mixed in a lot of variety. Now, I want to talk a little bit today about the face of minstrelsy, and for most people, that would be Bert Williams. Bert Williams was probably, well, W.C. Fields said it best. Bert Williams was the funniest man I ever saw and the saddest man I ever met. In 1910, Florin Ziegfeld took a chance on a black comedian who had begun his career in the minstrel shows, Bert Williams. The American minstrel tradition is really the center of the American musical theater, at least until the advent of rock and roll. It starts with whites imitating blacks, white guys creating the whole dialect using the rolling eyes, and the dialect that black entertainers, what would happen is black entertainers and black audience members would look in and feel confused and feel, well, hold on, I can do better than that. Elements of the minstrel shows, the dancing, the cross-dressing, the comedy and structure made their way into the musical, but few black entertainers ever made it onto the Broadway stage in those early days, except for Egbert Williams. Funny name. Bert Williams was an immigrant from the West Indies, and he delighted audiences with comedy routines and a dance called the Cakewalk. And in 1903, he starred in Da Homie. No, it's written that way, in Da Homie, the first full-length musical written and performed by blacks in America. The only way really to make it back at that time was to black up. No doubt it cut him to the quick to do that, but he found a way to make it and use it as a social statement. Beyond that mask, he could say anything he wanted to. On stage, he only played one character, a low-class servant comedy character who appeared to shuffle, but he had his eye and mind awake to everything around him. Williams did something to the character new to that style. He turned it inside out. He became the fool who speaks with the words of a wise man. And if you look back in theater history, Italian commedia dell'arte has this character. It's called the servant or the Lazzi. Listen to Bert Williams for just a moment. You might get more of a sense of him.
When life seems full of clouds and rain, and I am full of nothing and pain, soothe my thumping, bumping brain.
When life seems full of clouds and rain, and I am full of nothing and pain, who soothes my thumping brain? Nobody.
With snow and sleet, and me with hunger and cold feet. Who fails help? And if I fail, go ahead and get some meat. Go on, why don't you? Nobody.
Just the lyrics give you a sense. When winter comes with snow and sleet, and me with hunger and cold feet, who says, here's 25 cents, go ahead and get something. Go eat. Well, go on now, why don't you? Nobody. That was Bert Williams' signature song. And it was a song about a person so turned off by his treatment in society that he has to decide to stop doing anything for anybody else. But Williams, with a flick of his wrist, or a shrug of the shoulders, or a look in his eye, he could make the audience both feel for him and laugh with him.
I never done nothing to nobody. I never got nothing from nobody, no time. Until I get something from somebody sometime. I'll never do nothing for nobody no time.
Rather than appear in the same show with Bert Williams at that time, the stars of the Ziegfeld Follies threatened to quit. And Ziegfeld says, go on. You can all go. I can replace all of you. I cannot replace him. So go ahead. Everyone except the man that you want me to fire. Bert Williams said, I've never been able to discover that there's anything disgraceful in being a colored man, but I've often found it inconvenient. How to turn it around and make it have some humor, some heart. Williams was able to have his contracts stipulate that he would not have to tour the South, nor would he have to be on stage with white women. Very dangerous at that time. There is an apocryphal story that tells you a lot about Bert Williams. He walked into a bar. He asked the bartender for a martini, and the bartender said, that'll be $1,000. Bert Williams, without saying a word, opened his coat, took out his wallet, and put down 5 1,000 bills and said, I'll have 5. He had the humor of pain. He's quoted as saying, I don't know who to talk to about art. My job is to make them laugh. And when they laugh, I know it's going. If I were free to do as I liked, I would give both sides, the pathos as well as the fun. But the public knows me for certain things. If I attempt anything outside of those things, I am not Bert Williams. Here's a little more of Bert.
When I was in that railroad wreck, thought I'd cashed in my last check. Who took the engine off my neck? Nobody. One time when things was looking bright, I started to whittle on a stick one night. Who cried out, stop now, that's dynamite. Not a soul. nothing from no starting no time. Oh, until I get something from somebody sometime. Oh, never do nothing for nobody no time.
For another view of Broadway, let's take a look at another person from Broadway. Another personality. Imagine 1893, a little boy named Izzy Balin arriving from Russia at Ellis Island knowing no English. He said he knew that they looked a little strange there in what he called his Jew clothes, completely out of place in this world. He was a little Russian-born kid, son of an Orthodox rabbi living on the Lower East Side of New York City. He said, I never felt poverty because I'd never known anything else. We had an enormous family. In the summer, some of us slept on the fire escape or on the roof. I slept better in tenement houses than I do now in a comfortable bed. His father taught him to sing. He would have sung in temple on the high holidays, so that music, that culture, that minor chromatic melody music was already in his ear. Then, of course, he's influenced. He's in New York City on the street. There are organ grinders playing, Italian opera, ragtime, minstrel music. He had an ear not just for the musical melody and rhythm, but for the sound of speech. In 1907, as a singing waiter at a saloon off the Bowery, he sung his first song in an Italian accent. Let's take a little listen to that.
My sweet Marie from sunny Italy, oh how I do love you. Say that you'll always love me too, forevermore I will be true.
Now this sounds kind of New Yorky.
And I will marry.
When we get to the chorus, though, he's actually written in
You'll surely be my
funny dialect.
Marie from sunny Italy. My sweet Marie.
Sweet Marie from sunny Italy.
I do love you. Say that you'll always love me too.
There was such a mix of cultures then, and everyone appreciated the cultures. They didn't always know how best to express them, but they certainly played with them. On the first piece of printed music that Irving Berlin wrote, there was an error. People are always spelling your name wrong. I'm a good example of that. Spell my first name, I challenge you. You'll get it wrong. Almost everybody does the first time. Anyway, they printed Berlin. Berlin was hard for people to pronounce, and he let it go. He thought, why not? It's a good name for an American songwriter. There was only one place for Berlin to go to be a songwriter, not on Broadway, but a short block on West 28th Street, a place where pianos banged out from every open window, and it was called Tin Pan Alley. It was where all the song publishers set up shop. You sold a song for a dime, remember? No TV, no radio. Every family had a piano in the living room. That was a sign of class. Establishing himself on Tin Pan Alley, Berlin sold a variety of songs. Where? To the Ziegfeld Follies. I mean, it led the way for Victor Herbert, who became famous for his American operettas, and it led the way for Jerome Kern, that often spiced up British songs with American flavor. But Berlin was the first to write a Broadway musical incorporating the new beat of popular musical ragtime. It's hard for us to imagine now, but at that time in 1910, ragtime was scandalous. It was, I think it was even worse than how some people consider rap. Maybe rap in the 90s anyway. It spelled the end of civilization as we knew it. But in 1911, Irving Berlin writes a ragtime song that suddenly makes ragtime safe. It's not threatening. What do you think that song was? Let's give a listen.
Come on and hear Alexander's ragtime band. Come on and hear.
Come on in here. It's the best band in the land.
They can play a bugle call like you never heard before. So natural that you wanna go to war. That's Come on along, let me take you by the hand. Up to the man, who's the leader of the band. And if you care to hear the Swanee River played in ragtime, come on and hear, Alexander's Ragtime Band.
It sounds so old-fashioned now, doesn't it? But it was so new at that time and something that they hadn't really heard before. Once Irving Berlin has this enormous hit, Broadway opens its door to Irving Berlin and to ragtime. Between 1914 and 1962, it's a freaking long time, Berlin composed almost 24 Broadway musicals and found a way to use music to capture the spirit of his adopted country. Jerome Kern was once asked to place Berlin. Where does he fit in American musical history? And Jerome Kern said Irving Berlin has no place in American music. He is American music. I'm going to ask you to do an assignment based on this song. This is My New York. Let's give this a listen. I'm going to ask you to take that and tell me about your hometown. What makes you burst with pride about your hometown? It doesn't have to be My New York. It can be your anywhere. In 1909, Irving Berlin provided a song for a young comedienne, and he suggested that she sing it with a fake Yiddish accent. It soon became the trademark for Fanny Brice. You would know her as Barbra Streisand in the movie Funny Girl and Funny Later. I'm wearing second-hand hats, second-hand clothes. That's why they call me second-hand Rose. Even a piano in the parlor, Daddy bought for 10 cents on the dollar. Second-hand piles, I'm wearing second-hand curls. I never get a single thing that's new. Even Jake, the plumber, he's the man I adore. He had the nerve to tell me he's been married before. Everyone knows that I'm just second-hand Rose from Second Avenue. From Second Avenue. You? When Ziegfeld signed her in 1910 for $75 a week, Brice ran down the street with a contract showing it to everyone she met. It was very interesting to see Fanny Brice as a Ziegfeld star when you think that Ziegfeld's mantra for the American woman was beauty. And here was this garrulous, certainly not by any standards that we consider, she was not really a physically beautiful woman, although if you look at her pictures now, she was very pretty, whose humor was all based on silliness, on the pratfall, the wide eyes, the raucous delivery. Fanny Brice was one of those fabulous talents who was a comic, a mimic, a singer, a dancer, who could do practically anything. In anything Fanny Bryce is quoted as saying, "In anything Jewish I ever did, I wasn't standing apart and making fun. I was the race, and what happened to me on stage is what could happen to my people. They identified with me, which made it all right to get a laugh." On a trip to Paris, Ziegfeld bought the rights to a heartbreaking song for Fanny Bryce. Everyone thought, why would he give her this song? And in fact, when it was given to Fanny, she thought she'd sing it for comic effect, but Ziegfeld would have none of it. Let's listen to that song. It's called My Man.
There's one thing that I've got, it's my man. Cold and wet, tired you bet, but all that I soon forget with my man. He's not much for look, and no hero out of book. He's my man. 2 or 3 girls has he that he likes as well as me, but I love him. Don't know why I should. He isn't good. He isn't good.
It's a funny song, and she sang it so well, she made people cry. What Ziegfeld was so interested in was that she was really one of a kind. She could sing a ballad like My Man, and then turn around and do Becky and the Ballet, which is hysterical. You should look it up on Google. This is enormous versatility. He really got 2 for 1 in Fanny. Now, right around that time, we're getting into war. World War I. And now we're back to George M. Cohan. And here's a song you'll know.
Johnny, get your gun, get your gun, get your gun. Take it.
You'll get it in a minute. When America joined the World War I in 1917, George M. Cohan was charged to his country's aid. And he hit a great song on Tin Pan Alley, a number inspired by the first 3 notes of a bugle call. World War I changed the style of America's popular music.
Over there, send the word over there. That the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming. The drums rum-tumming everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer. Send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over. And we won't come back till it's over there.
There was a wave of patriotic anthems that swept everything else aside. With American boys overseas in the trenches, there was little interest in silly songs with foreign dialects or romantic operettas featuring European aristocrats. Of course, Ziegfeld let the public know where he stood. In the finale of The Follies of 1917, it featured not only Paul Revere and Abraham Lincoln, but President Woodrow Wilson inspecting the troops. Troops were all comprised of Ziegfeld girls, that is. As one showgirl recalled, there were 2 numbers that had the theme of the military, and we would put our foot on the footlights and lean over and sing to the audience that way. To welcome the doughboys back home, he created an extravagant show of unparalleled artistry and expense. Berlin chipped in with 9 songs. One included called Mandy. It started in the Follies. The Follies were in the New Amsterdam Theater. And there was a woman who was the understudy. This is very important that you know the culture. If you have an understudy, you can be replaced. Sometimes it's nice to have that in rehearsal when you're not feeling good and you can leave and the rest of the cast can still rehearse. But be aware, the understudies more often than not do take over. And this woman did take over and became a huge star in the musical Mandy. And you know this tune too. I was strolling out one evening by the silvery moon. I could hear somebody singing a familiar tune, so I stopped a while to listen. Not a word I wanted to miss. By the light of the silvery moon. Oh yeah, that came from Berlin and the Ziegfeld Follies. In the theater, Florian Ziegfeld exercised complete control, but outside of that stage door, the power of the producer was starting to get challenged. Unions were developing everywhere. A newspaper headline read, "Revolt of the Thespians, August 1919. They put on a show that was no show, off stage and on strike. That was called the Red Summer of 1919, when labor unrest swept the nation. Strikes by steel workers, dressmakers, and finally Broadway performers. Before 1919, there was no protective union for actors. And of course, we worked for practically nothing. There were no breaks. There were no days off. You did it because you loved the audience and you wanted to give your heart to them. But if you wanted it to be your profession, it needed to be treated like a profession. So we formed the union, Actors Equity Association, of which I am a proud member. Later on comes the Screen Actors Guild, SAG, which I am also a member. And somewhere in between was the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, which has now merged with SAG, Screen Actors Guild. Ziegfeld filed a legal action to prohibit Follies members from striking, but found that almost everyone was on the side of the actors. What really helped the actors was that the musicians joined, and then the electricians and the stagehands came out, and that was really the end of it. It was over in 2 days. Actors were guaranteed payment for rehearsal, transportation, home after an out-of-town flop, and they no longer had to provide their own costumes. Of course, we still do that in college, occasionally. There also was the WPA, and there were a lot of musicals created at that time. Pete Seeger became famous for "Which Side Are You On? Which Side Are You On?" There were funny songs like "I once was a union maid who never was afraid of gooks and kinks and company finks and the deputy sheriff that made the grade." Here's a musical from that era called Pins and Needles. You should look it up.
It's darker than the dark bottom. It rumbles more than the rumba. If you think that the two-step got 'em, just take a look at this number. It's got that certain swing that makes you wanna sing. Don't go left, but be polite. Move to the right, doing the reactionary. Close your eyes.
As this plays out, I want to remind you to check my courses, do the discussions, the assignments, the quizzes, stay up to date. If you have any questions, email me, lrdnpa@rit.edu. I'll get right back to you. I hope this has helped put a face on this era of the American musical theater. Bye.